The day the gods fell silent. What if the downfall of one of the most advanced civilizations in the Americas wasn't just about guns, germs, or gold, but something far more complex? What if the fall of the Aztec Empire was not a clean conquest, but a perfect storm of betrayal, belief, and blood? In this video, we'll uncover the real story behind the fall of Tenochtitlan. You'll see how a handful of Spaniards led by Hernán Cortés took on a mighty empire, backed not only by steel and horses, but by thousands of native allies, by divine misunderstanding, and by devastating disease. This is not a story of good versus evil. It's a story of chaos, calculation, and consequence. By the end of these 15 minutes, you'll understand how the Aztec world unraveled, not just from external invasion, but from the cracks within. And why this moment didn't just change Mexico, it reshaped the world. Blood, betrayal, and broken lives. Picture yourself as an Aztec priest standing atop the Templo Mayor, watching strange ships appear on the eastern horizon. You've spent your life offering blood to the gods to keep the sun rising. Now foreigners come bearing thunder, steel, and the smell of smoke. The omens had warned of change, but no prophecy could prepare you for what was coming. For the Mexica people, daily life collapsed almost overnight. Markets emptied, temples fell, families were torn apart as war raged through the streets of Tenochtitlan. Some fought to the death, others surrendered in confusion, and many indigenous communities, long oppressed by Aztec tribute demands, chose to side with the invaders, trading one empire for another. On the other side, the Spanish soldiers didn't just fight. They feared. They bled. They starved. Many believed they were part of a holy mission, while others were driven by greed. Few understood the culture they were destroying, and yet, their march through the Valley of Mexico would echo through centuries. How the Aztecs rose to rule Mesoamerica. By the early 1500s, the Aztec Empire had become the most powerful force in Mesoamerica. Centered in the shimmering island capital of Tenochtitlan, what is now Mexico City, the empire thrived through military conquest and a complex tribute system. Gold, food, textiles, and captives flowed into the heart of the empire from hundreds of subjected cities. But beneath the grandeur, resentment brewed. The Aztecs demanded loyalty, and often blood, from their neighbors. Human sacrifice, central to their religious worldview, required constant captives. While this instilled fear and reverence, it also seeded a growing coalition of enemies eager for revenge. The empire appeared mighty, but its foundation was cracked by regional tensions. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Spain had just completed the Reconquista and was hungry for glory, gold, and souls to convert. In 1519, Hernán Cortés set sail from Cuba with a few hundred men and a handful of horses, defying his orders to stay put. He wasn't just chasing riches, he believed history would remember him. As Cortés landed on the coast of modern-day Veracruz, he encountered native peoples who would shape his campaign. Some, like the Totonacs, offered gifts and alliances. Others, like the Tlaxcalans, fought bitterly, then joined him, seeing in the Spaniards a weapon against their Aztec overlords. The seeds of betrayal were already sprouting. The Spanish arrive and everything changes. Cortés marched inland, cutting a path toward Tenochtitlan, with a growing army of native allies. The Aztecs watched anxiously. Emperor Moctezuma II, a devout believer in omens, was paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. Reports of men with metal skin and beasts the size of deer echoed ancient prophecies of returning gods. Moctezuma chose diplomacy over war, at first. When Cortés arrived at the edge of Lake Texcoco in November 1519, he was stunned. Rising from the water like a vision was Tenochtitlan, larger and cleaner than most European cities, with floating gardens, canals, and bustling marketplaces. The emperor welcomed him into the city with gifts of gold, and unwittingly sealed his fate. The Spaniards, dazzled by the wealth, saw conquest not only as possible, but ordained. Tensions rose quickly. As Cortés left the city temporarily to face Spanish reinforcements in Veracruz, his lieutenant Pedro de Alvarado ordered a massacre of Aztec nobles during a religious ceremony. When Cortés returned, the city was on the verge of revolt. In June 1520, the Aztecs exploded into rebellion. Moctezuma, once their divine ruler, was now seen as a traitor. He was killed, possibly by his own people. Cortés and his men attempted a desperate escape during a torrential storm, carrying stolen gold through the canals. Hundreds drowned or were captured. The Spanish called it La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. The Siege of Tenochtitlan. The empire collapses. After the disaster of La Noche Triste, Cortés retreated, regrouped, and began preparing for the final assault. He rebuilt his army with thousands of native warriors who had long resented Aztec dominance. They weren't just allies, they were revenge seekers. In less than a year, Cortés would return with vengeance in his eyes and destruction in his hands. By May 1521, the siege of Tenochtitlan began. The Spanish blocked the city's causeways and used brigantines, small warships they had constructed, to cut off supplies via the lake. The once thriving metropolis became a prison. Starvation, disease, and despair devoured the population from within. Smallpox, introduced by the Europeans, spread like wildfire. The gods were silent. Cuauhtémoc, the new emperor and last leader of the Aztecs, refused to surrender. His warriors fought with unmatched courage, turning the streets and temples into battlegrounds soaked with blood. But their obsidian blades were no match for steel and gunpowder. The city that once stood as the jewel of Mesoamerica crumbled under the weight of war and famine. On August 13, 1521, after 93 days of siege, Tenochtitlan fell. Cuauhtémoc was captured, and the remnants of his people were enslaved or slaughtered. The city was reduced to rubble, its temples burned, its canals filled with corpses. The Aztec Empire was no more. In its place rose a new world, Nueva España, built on ruins and conquest. The structural power of the Aztec Empire. The Aztec Empire wasn't a centralized kingdom, but a complex web of tribute states bound together by fear, alliances, and war. At its core was the Triple Alliance, Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan, with Tenochtitlan reigning supreme. Its emperor was more than a ruler. He was the divine representative of the gods, the sun's chosen agent on earth. Their economy thrived on tribute. Conquered cities were forced to send textiles, cacao, feathers, gold, and even slaves to the capital. Markets, especially the vast one at Tlatelolco, were bustling centers of commerce, where barter and cacao beans served as currency. This economic machine kept the empire fed, clothed, and constantly expanding. Militarily, the Aztecs were unmatched in Mesoamerica. Young men trained from childhood in the arts of war, and battlefield valor was tied to social status. Capturing prisoners, rather than killing them, was the highest honor, feeding the empire's ritual sacrifice system. These public executions weren't just religious. They were psychological warfare, instilling awe and terror in those who watched. Religion was the empire's glue. The gods required nourishment, and the sun's daily rise depended on human blood. This belief fueled constant warfare, justified expansion, and legitimized the elite. Priests held immense power, interpreting omens, declaring holy wars, and ensuring divine order. To disobey was not just treason. It was cosmic disruption. Communication and infrastructure were also advanced. The Aztecs built an extensive network of roads and causeways, enabling messengers to relay information rapidly. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, was an engineering marvel, built on a lake with floating gardens, aqueducts, and pyramids that kissed the sky. It was a city born from vision and discipline. Hidden facts about the Aztec Empire. What most people don't know is that the Aztec Empire may have never fallen, had it not been for a devastating twist of nature. Smallpox, brought by the Europeans, swept through Tenochtitlan like wildfire. It killed nearly half the population in just weeks, including the Emperor Cuitlahuac. The Aztecs believed it was a curse from the gods, but in reality it was invisible biological warfare. Another overlooked factor: the Spanish didn't conquer alone. Thousands of indigenous warriors, Tlaxcalans, Totonacs, and others, fought alongside them. These were enemies of the Aztecs, long oppressed by the tribute system. For them, Cortés was a weapon to turn against their old masters. Without these alliances, the Spanish would have been annihilated within days. And then, there's the prophecy. Many Aztecs believed the return of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, would come from the east. When white-skinned men with shining armor arrived by sea, some saw it as fate. This belief, part myth, part misunderstanding, paralyzed the empire's response. The psychological edge was won before the first sword was drawn. The global impact of the Aztec Empire's fall. The fall of the Aztec Empire reshaped not just Mesoamerica, but the entire trajectory of global history. With the conquest, Spain became one of the richest empires in the world, fueled by the gold, silver, and resources extracted from the former Aztec lands. This sudden influx of wealth ignited the rise of European colonialism across the globe. But the cost was catastrophic. Millions of indigenous lives were lost, not only to war, but to disease, slavery, and forced conversion. Entire cultures were erased or absorbed. Yet fragments of the Aztec world survived, in language, food, and rituals, hidden beneath the surface of modern Mexican identity. Every Dia de los Muertos, every Nahuatl word still spoken, is a defiance against historical extinction. And beyond Mexico, the conquest set a blueprint for domination. The pattern of invasion, alliance, exploitation, and erasure repeated itself across the Americas and beyond. What happened in Tenochtitlan was not an isolated tragedy. It was the opening chapter in a global era of empires rising by destroying others. Echoes of an empire, buried in time. Picture the final moments of Tenochtitlan, smoke rising above shattered temples, canals running red, and the silence of a fallen world. What was once the heart of a vibrant civilization became rubble under foreign boots. And yet, the Aztecs did not vanish. They transformed, endured, and echoed across generations. History is often written by the victors. But beneath the official chronicles lies another truth, one carved into stone, sung in ancient tongues, and painted on surviving codices. The fall of the Aztec Empire is not just a story of conquest. It's a warning about power, hubris, and the cost of underestimating the tide of history. So when we ask what really happened, it's more than dates and battles. It's about what was lost and what remains. The ruins of Tenochtitlan still lie beneath the streets of modern-day Mexico City. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear the heartbeat of an empire that refused to be forgotten.